بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to another episode of Ask Eman, broadcasted live from the London studio of Iman Channel on Sky 757. We're also streaming it live on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe to all our platforms, including our Facebook page, our YouTube channel. And Alhamdulillah, we are also now on TikTok. And of course, please do follow our Twitter page and our Instagram page. Do like it. 0203 515 0757, our studio number. You can call in using the WhatsApp number, especially our international viewers. 07916841483. Once again, our WhatsApp number. And of course, you can drop us a text on WhatsApp number. And feel free to leave your questions in the comment section below, either on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. Once again, I would like to remind you, we're also streaming it live via our website, imanchannel.tv. I'm your host, Qamarul Islam. Joining us tonight, none other than Imam Abid Khan. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi. How are you doing, brother Qamar?
Thank you very much for giving us your valuable time. On Tuesday, we did face-to-face, and alhamdulillah, on Saturday, we are virtually meeting again. Once again, thank you very much for giving us your valuable time. Now, let's move on straight to our discussion before we start taking questions. How honest and truthful should we be when it comes to claiming welfare benefits? Because as far as I understand, some people do mention that you can be economical with truth. If you can please throw some lights with regards to the Islamic principle and how honest and truthful should we be in all aspects of our life, not selected matters.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha wa kunu ma'as sadiqeen. O you who believe, keep your duty to God Almighty by being upright as an individual and God conscious, and always remain with the truthful. Be truthful. And he says separately in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. O you who believe, keep your duty to God and be upright as a person thereby, and speak a word directed to the truth. Be truthful and honest. And the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, "Alaykum bis-sidq, fa inna as-sidqa yahdi ila al-birr." He said, "Upon you, you must be truthful. Indeed, truthfulness leads to piety, and piety leads to Jannah. And beware of lies. For indeed, a person for indeed lies and being having the trait of being a liar will lead to wickedness, and wickedness leads to the hellfire. And indeed, a person continues to be truthful until they're written with Allah as being a Siddiq, someone incredibly truthful, and they're written with God with this high, lofty appellation. And the reverse is also true. Whoever is taken to lying, then they will be written eventually with God as being one of the liars. And the Quran itself also adds that لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل. Do not consume each other's wealth unlawfully, improperly, and in a manner which is not upright. And no doubt, when one is actually being deceptive and the like, then this leads, this falls the category of being lies, misrepresenting reality, which is in the professional sort of parlance known as of course as fraud, because it's misrepresenting one's situation, and it is also under ultimately a form of saying, deceit, which is man ghashana falaysa minna. Whoever acts deceitfully towards us is not one of us. So all of that sets quite a very stern sort of tone in terms of misrepresenting reality in order to take benefits. And ultimately, the believer wants to be someone who nourishes themselves through halal income and halal earnings, not through eating through other people's wealth. Simply thinking it's the government's or anything else does not actually reduce it from being people's wealth. It, in fact, is the public purse and needs being dealt with scrupulous and honestly. I'd add, I mean, I'm no longer, as I've said previously, I'm no longer an imam. But when I was, and I would be kind of speaking with other imams, they would mention that this is something that would come up quite often. So it's something which really all communities need to be mindful of and wary of, and recognize the grave consequences in this world and the hereafter for doing so, or not doing so.
Thank you very much for that clarification. And also, as Sheikh has mentioned, the word fraud, of course, we know it is illegal and there are sentences and punishment or consequences for that. So let's be mindful. And just because someone who's not a Muslim does it, or we see other people are doing it, doesn't mean as Muslims living especially in the Western country, we should be following it. Rather, we should be the ambassador of truth. We are representing our deen, and we should never be caught in such sort of events, and always be honest and truthful, as Sheikh has mentioned. Now, Sheikh, let's move on swiftly to our first generated question. And the first and important question is about Salah. We've got a couple of Salah question related. Let's start with this one. While someone is praying, if they have a distraction, are they allowed to click or clap, Sheikh?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In terms of the distraction, it's not entirely clear what the question intends by that. However, it's quite possible that sometimes people mean something along the following lines. So let's say you have a mother of a child, and she's praying, and her toddler is just, in the living room, and she wants to actually either alert the toddler not to do that, or needs to alert maybe another carer, her husband, or her sister or mother, etc., or vice versa. Husband wants to tell his wife, that the child's about to do something dangerous, God forbid, place their finger near the plug or socket or the like. Then that's kind of trying to draw attention to that, to that phenomenon, that fact. That's something which some of the scholars have undoubtedly allowed. Other scholars considered if there's excessive amounts of movement, then that would invalidate the prayer. But that would not be excessive in and of itself anyway, inshallah ta'ala. So it's something which is acceptable to do so, and Allah knows best. Other scholars said that instead of clapping, the thing to do is to make tasbih itself. There's a hadith which says, indicates that one should be done by men and women. Some of the ulama, the majority, said that's exactly how it's to be done. Others, such as the Malikiya, said that tasbih is uniform to men and women alike. So you just say subhanallah out aloud, and that subhanallah is there to alert and to draw people's attention to the fact that something is happening.
Thank you very much. Let's move on swiftly to our next question, again related to Salah. It's an important question. If you come late to the congregational prayer and start with the Imam on the 4th rak'ah, how would you make up the remaining 3? Is the fiqh position on how to make it up unanimous? If not, then what are the other ways of doing so?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In terms of a musalli who comes and joins the Imam in the 4th rak'ah, this is known as someone who joins the Imam after the first takbiratul ihram, and misses a rak'ah or more. Here in the 4th rak'ah, that means they've missed 3 rak'ahs already. They're known as in the books of fiqh as someone who is masbuq. Masbuq meaning that they now have to stand up after the salam of the Imam and make up the remainder of the prayer. The question is how to do so. The scholars have some discussion in this respect, and some scholars, and there are broadly 2 camps or 2 approaches to going about making up those missed rak'ahs of prayer. And both are valid and legitimate, and inshallah, whichever school of thought a person follows, they're upon khair, and there's no need to kind of restrict that which is left open within the Islamic fiqh itself. So one approach, and that's of the Hanafi and the Maliki school of thought, is to see the first rak'ah that one prays, that 4th rak'ah that person catches, which is the person's own individual first rak'ah. They say, no, that's not your first rak'ah. That is actually your 4th rak'ah. So when you stand up thereafter, you're going to pray with the next rak'ah after the salam of the Imam as being your first rak'ah. So in essence, you've prayed your 4th rak'ah. Now you're praying your first, then your second, and going to do it tashahhud. Then you stand up to your 3rd, and then because you've already done your 4th, you then do tashahhud after the 3rd. Okay, so that's how it would work. That's according to the Hanafi and the Maliki position. As for the Shafi'i Hanbali school of thoughts, then they say that 4th rak'ah that you prayed was in reality your first, not just from a third-party perspective, your 3rd. It actually is your 3rd rak'ah. It actually is your first rak'ah. Sorry, I'm going to say that again. According to the Shafi'i Hanbali school of thought, that rak'ah you prayed as soon as you enter with the Imam, which was his 4th rak'ah, that is your first. And so you then stand up after he says salams, and you pray one more rak'ah. Then you'll do tashahhud because that's now your second rak'ah, and you pray two more rak'ahs and make the salam. So to summarize, there are two approaches. One approach which says that whichever rak'ah you enter in, your rak'ah is that of the imams. So imams praying the fourth, that's your fourth. If and therefore you have to make up your first, second, and third. Your fourth is already prayed. That's approach A, which is associated with the Hanafi Maliki school. As for approach B, associated with Shafi and Hanbali school, then they say that whichever rak'ah you enter in of the imam, it's irrelevant what rak'ah it says of the imams. What matters is that's your first rak'ah, right? So those are the two approaches, and Allah knows best.
Thank you very much for that, Sheikh. I've got a follow-up question regarding this. We need to highlight just practically how should we do it, but I'll touch that in the next segment. You're watching Ask Eman live on Iman Channel on Sky 757 0203 515 0757, our studio number, 07916 841 483, our WhatsApp number. Both the numbers are displayed at the bottom of your screen. Thank you very much for sending us the questions on WhatsApp. And I can see you've already sent us a question on YouTube. Inshallah, please do continue. And when we come back from the break, we'll start with the question, but after we have discussed the questions about the Salah. It's time for a short break. We'll be back in a few moments. Thank you very much. Welcome back. You're watching Ask Eman live on Iman Channel on Sky 757 with Sheikh Abid Khan. 0203-515-0757, 0791684143. Both the numbers are displayed. Feel free to leave us your questions on our comment section below, either on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. And kindly don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe to our Facebook page, our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter. Do like our Instagram page. And alhamdulillah, we are now on TikTok. Now, let's, in fact, in the first segment, we've discussed we've discussed about being honest and truthful in whichever circumstances we are in. And if you have missed it, you can watch the repeat on Ask Eman highlights either tomorrow or day after tomorrow, or you can find the videos on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. There was a question about Salah. Now we'll be asking some practical follow-up question regarding the Salah. Now, Sheikh, you've answered the question beautifully with regards to someone missing the third rakah and joining, or someone missing the 3 rakah and joining with the Imam at the 4th rakah. Now let's look at the practical example. So I, for example, joined the Imam at the 4th rakah. Now I'm sitting down. One of the ways is this correct, that once the Imam does tasleem, I get up from my sitting position, finish my 1 rakah, and then do my tashahud, no durood or anything else, and then again I stand up, complete my 2 rakah, and then sit down and end the salah with tasleem. Is that one of the correct methods?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Absolutely.
Okay, which school of thought is this method?
That school of thought would be the Shafi'i and Hanbali school of thought.
Okay, Shafi and Hanbali. And with regards to the Hanafi and the Maliki madhab, you're saying, well, I joined the Imam at the 4th rakah, and then after Imam does the tasleem, I stand up, complete my 2 rakah, and sit down. Then I finish with my final rakah and then sit down and do it with tasleem. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes. So with the Hanafi and Maliki school, you entered with the 4th rakah. He says Assalamu alaikum. You stand up, and instead of praying just 1 more rakah before doing a tashahud, you're going to pray 2 more rakahs before tashahud.
Excellent. Right? That's good. That's what I meant.
Right.
So,
yeah, exactly.
So 2 more rakah, then sit down for the tashahud, only tashahud, and then stand up again for the final rakah, and then sit down with the tashahud and end it with the tasleem.
Yes, correct.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I hope, my dear viewers, this is clear now. And if you still have any further question, or if you require any further clarification, 0203-515-0757. Once again, thank you very much for asking such an important question. Now, next question. Let's move on to the generated question. And it's an important question, especially one may say it's closely associated with people who belong to subcontinent or even perhaps in Africa. Brother Junaid is asking, how important is it to know your family lineage?
Brother Junaid, Jazakallah khair for your question. The answer is family lineage is something that's important in Islam, of course, in accordance with one's capacity. The reason why it's important is that this is it is part of one's recognition of them, is part of one's shukr to Allah and then to them, as they were the means of your being brought into this world. By extension, you know, your parents are your most immediate source of you being born into this world, and your grandparents and great-grandparents are all part of that same chain going back. And so it's part of that shukr. B, it's also what you are known by. You're known by this. And that's important. C, and this is not in any particular order, I should point out, is that it's something that the Prophet ﷺ warned of, that one should try and associate oneself with to other than their father. So kind of say, if one doesn't know one's, if one kind of misassociates oneself with a lineage that they do not belong to knowingly, then that would be something wrong, obviously. But then there's another point as well, which is, if one doesn't know them, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this in the Quran, one's lineage. It says, "Ud'uuhum li'aba'ihim." Call them or refer to them by in line of their lineage. فَإِن لَمْ تَعْلَمُوا, if you do not know it, then they are your brothers. And so there's a recognition that everything in Islamic teachings, or by and large, is bound by your capacity to do so. So if one is unable to know and does not know exactly their family lineage, then that's quite, you know, it's a different matter. But we're talking about when you do know it, then you should recognize it and attest to it, so long as, of course, there's not going to be some overriding harm or that's going to be inflicted on you as a result of your lineage. That's all fine and good, and you should associate yourself with it. And of course, I'd end by saying that one's lineage is something which is and the preservation of that, along with the reputation, is said to be one of the five al-kulliyatul khams, or the five things which are, if you like, sacrosanct and made, if you like, sacred, or which have also been described as being the objectives, the higher goals of Islamic guidance and laws, is that the preservation of lineage in of itself. And of course, by recognizing your lineage, for example, at the most immediate level, being, for example, one's siblings, one's also, if one's shared a mother, what they call through feeding, then of course there are consequences for marriage as well, and not being allowed to, who one is allowed to marry, who's not appropriate to marry. So for all of those reasons, it's important to try and know one's lineage, inshallah. And this has been the practice of the earliest Muslims and those who came after them, and Allah knows best.
Just to clarify, the verse that you've recited, "Ud'uuhum li'abaihim huwa aqsatu 'inda Allah," and to the end of the verse, does this mean that the lineage in Islam comes from the father?
I mean, yes, the lineage comes from the father. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Now let's move on to our next question, and it's regarding Salah. Praying witr according to the Hanafi fiqh, if in witr on the third rak'ah, instead of raising my hands and saying Allahu Akbar, I go into ruku and stand up with the intention to go into sujood. Upon realizing my mistake, I raise my hands and read my dua qunut and carry on as normal. Do I have to do a sajda sahw for my mistake, or do I have to repeat my salatul witr?
I didn't follow this question, Brother Qamarul. Are you saying that someone enters witr or they enter fard salah?
No, it's witr, salatul witr. Someone is praying on their own salatul witr. So in Hanafi fiqh, on the third rak'ah, after you've done the surah, Fatiha and a surah that you've joined, instead of going to ruku, you say Allahu Akbar to read the dua qunut. So that dua qunut, someone has mistakenly forgotten it, and instead of Allahu Akbar, instead of reading the dua qunut, they went to the ruku itself.
Yes.
Okay. Now, upon realizing that they have missed the dua qunut, so they come back from the ruku and they start reading dua qunut, and then they go on ruku and complete the salah with sajda sahw. Now, is that enough for sajda sahw, or do they need to repeat the entire witr salah?
So what's meant to have happened is, given the fact that they have moved into the ruku' position, assuming they've moved into it fully or more than half, then actually, according to the Hanafi school of thought, they've now missed a wajib of the witr itself, and that means they should make sujood sahw later on. Okay, so they should make sujood sahw later on, but not that they should actually come out of ruku', which is an actual rukun of salah, and go back and do this dua al-qunut and then carry on from there. So having done that, then inshallah that's fine for what's happened, but not to be repeated in the future thereafter, okay? And some more of the view that actually what would be required is actually a repeating of the whole of the witr, because actually they broke the pattern and the form of the salah by going into a rukun and then going back, rising them back into the standing position, qunut, and then going to do ruku again. Some of the view that actually that's required to be repeated. Inshallah, we say it's fine that what they've done is they've done. But in future, what they should do is, if they forgot it, then they should just simply carry on and make sujood at the sahw at the end. And that's according to the Hanafi school of thought. The other schools of thought that do not require dua al-qunut, then they will say there's no sujood sahwi required in the first place.
Okay, and also there's another thing, important point I have to mention here, because the question is asking, I go into the ruku and stand up with the intention to go into sujood. In that scenario as well, same process applies?
The same process applies, correct.
Okay, excellent. Also, another thing, can we not do, for example, if someone has mistakenly forgotten the qunut and they went to the ruku, we know there is another form of witr, or if you can kindly correct us, that when you stand up from the ruku, you can raise your hand and start doing the qunut as well. Isn't that a correct process?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So the madhab, basically, based on the fact that the narrations from the Prophet ﷺ, some of them have narrated the qunut happening before the ruku. Others stated after the ruku'. Now, the scholars of Islam, the jurists, they took three approaches in this respect. Two main approaches, and I'll explain what the third one is in a moment. One approach was actually that. So in essence, the first two approaches, they're looking at the same ahadith, and and each of the two approaches, one is giving preference to one set of ahadith, seeing it as more authentic, more relied upon, or the final practice of the Prophet ﷺ, and thus the abrogating practice. Okay, so in that respect, the more Kufan school, which is the Hanafi school here, says that actually it is meant to be before the ruku. So that's the time they see it as being before the ruku. Okay. As for the Shafi'i position and the Hanbali, then they see in the main say the Hanbali, they say it's meant to be after the ruku. So you do the ruku, you stand up, and then you do the qunut, and then you go into sujood if you're performing this qunut. However, there's a third approach which says actually both have been narrated from the Prophet ﷺ, and both are authentic and acceptable, and thus maybe someone would sometimes do A, sometimes do B. So, but in the madhab's official positions, no, they wouldn't. A Hanafi would not avail himself of the Shafi position later on, and Allah knows best.
Okay, excellent. So if someone follows Hanafi fiqh, I literally have 20 seconds. They forgot the raising their hands. They went to the ruku, but they come back and raise their hands to do dua qunut. Do they still have to make sajda sahu?
Yes, they would.
Okay, excellent. That is clear. And Jazakallah khair for that detailed explanation, Sheikh. 0203 515 0757, our studio number, 07916841483, our WhatsApp number. You're watching Ask Eman. We'll be right back in a few moments. Thank you very much. Welcome back. You're watching Ask Eman live on Iman Channel on Sky 757 in conversation with Sheikh Abid Khan. 0203-515-0757, our studio number, 07916841483, our WhatsApp number. Both the numbers are displayed at the bottom of your screen, and feel free to leave your comments or questions in the comment section below, either on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. Do feel free to like, share, comment and subscribe to our Facebook page, YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter. Do like our Instagram page, and we're also now on TikTok. Now, let's move on to a next generated question, and it's asked by Khalfan, a name that we normally hear in Middle East. Brother Khalfan, thank you very much for asking this question. Let's start, Sheikh. Can you lease land to a company who will use it for a hotel that will sell alcohol, etc.?
Can you use lamb?
No, can you lease land to a company who will use it for a hotel that will sell alcohol or any other haram things, etc.?
Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. These are difficult questions because of a couple of factors, just to preface the answer with this backdrop. First of all, because there's some scholarly difference on the issue, and that needs being recognized. As we'll see, there's a difference of opinion with Imam Hanifa rahimahullah amongst the Hanafi school of thought saying one position, and the Sahibain, that's his two main disciples, namely Qadi Abu Yusuf and also Muhammad al-Hasan al-Shaybani, along with the Jumhur, which is the Maliki, Shafi and Hanabila, having another position. That's the first point. I'll explain what those positions are in a moment. Secondly, another angle of nuance in this respect is the fact that, at least in here in the West, often there's considerable challenges in terms of trying to maintain, keeping the properties such that they're leased out, and avoiding places which will not have any sort of questionable activity whatsoever, because there will be some sort of area where there might not be an entire overlap between your personal ethics versus that of the lessee. So is there a requirement between the lessee and the lessor that there, in terms of there being an overlap with the ethics? Thirdly, of course, is the fact that there's sometimes some sorts of legal phenomena that need being considered. That's to say that actually any action that could be even misinterpreted as discriminatory behavior, or actually is discriminatory behavior, could, of course, you need to speak with your lawyers yourselves, but it could lead to some sort of legal action as well. So with all of the above taken into account, I would give the following by way of information. Of course, you need to speak to a lawyer yourself to verify your own personal circumstances vis-a-vis the law itself. But from an Islamic standpoint, the positions are as follows. On the Jumhur position, that's of the majority, they had said from the four schools, they'd said that basically you're meant to not try do something, give land over which is going to be used in a way which definitively would be used for haram purposes. And that's based on the basis of the ayah, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Cooperate with one another upon righteousness and piety, not upon sinfulness and transgression. However, also within the four schools of thought, you have the position of Imam Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, which is what often referred to as the mufta bihi, the position which is with which fatwa is given or scholarly edicts are issued in large parts of the world, including the subcontinent, including over here in the UK, in many of the fiqh councils, and that's to say that no, if the actual activity of leasing it over is halal, and actually the core work is, of course, is not something which is, for example, being used for criminal activity in and of itself and the like, then yes, you are allowed to lease it out. And if you like, the moral duty is on the lessee, or sorry, let's speak clearly. The one who's leasing the property, the one who's actually renting the property out, they have their own questions to answer. You have your question to answer, which is simply that, is it being conducted in an honourable fashion in of itself, and in an upright way with probity. And so accordingly, you would be allowed to lease it. Of course, if you've got multiple options, etc., you'll consider your options as per what, will make it a reasonable transaction for yourself. But in terms of the Islamic position itself, that's hopefully been clarified through the two positions I mentioned, that of Imam Abu Hanifa on one side, and that of his two disciples and the Maliki Shafi'i Hanbali school on the other side, vis-a-vis this question of leasing out a property to someone who is going to have various activities, of which one will just be alcohol also being sold in that shop, for example. And Allah knows best.
Ameen Rabbal Alamin, thank you very much for that. And of course, for any legal matters, do consult qualified individuals. Now, before we move on to the next question, Baraka on YouTube is asking a question. This is in regards to our previous segment where we discussed about a person or an individual, if you have missed the program, catches the Imam on the fourth rak'ah, and then Sheikh answered, how can we make up those missed rak'ah, that is first, second and third, or third, fourth. The orders were all mentioned in the segment. Now, the questioner is asking, or the viewer is asking, does that mean I'll have 3 tashahhud if I join the 4 rak'ah? So I'm assuming this question is coming from the perspective, normally if we pray full, there will be 2 tashahhud. So here, in this context, it appears to be 3 tashahhud. So is there any issue with that?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. That's the correct conclusion you've derived from that answer.
Excellent. And I think in Salat al-Maghrib, there is a point where you have to have fourth tashahhud if you join after the Imam stood after the second rak'ah. Is that correct?
That's exactly what I was about to add. I was going to say that there are even scenarios whereby you can be praying a 3 rak'ah prayer, i.e. Maghrib, and you end up with 4 tashahhuds altogether. So yes, it's no surprise that you've got 3 tashahhuds in a 4 rak'ah prayer, due to those sort of extenuating circumstances.
Okay, that's it. So the salah is valid. And so there is no question about it, because our viewers sometimes they are confused about the fact that if you do the whole rak'ah, there is only 2 tashahhud. But if you miss it, there is either 3 or 4. So that's why I think the questioner is asking. So Jazakallah khair for that clarification. Now let's move on to our next question. And it is also related to salah. Rose on YouTube is asking the question, should I recite Surah Al-Fatiha after Imam finishes reading Surah Al-Fatiha in Jama'ah Salah? And also, Sheikh, if you can clarify about the Jum'ah Salah as well, whether an individual has to read Surah Fatiha after the Imam has completed reading Surah Al-Fatiha.
Okay, so the question of whether Surah Al-Fatiha is to be repeated after the Imam has prayed, after the Imam has recited his Fatiha, is predicated on the following, if you like, conundrum, for want of a better word. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and the ayat of the Quran state the following. The Quran states, وَإِذَا قُرَأَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. When the Quran is recited, then listen attentively and be silent and pay attention to it. So this is on the one hand. And the scholars of tafsir largely had stated the majority position being that refers to in the salah, especially in the salah itself. So when the Quran is being recited by the Imam, you recite, you don't recite, you be silent and you listen attentively. Secondly, you have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he says, "Mali unaza'." Why am I kind of being competed with while I'm reciting? So he's leading Salat al-Fajr one day and he's reciting, but he can hear people praying behind him reciting it as well. I'm not talking about Fatiha, I'm just talking about generally. It doesn't say what surah it was being recited by the Prophet ﷺ or by the people behind him. But simply that their recitation was interfering with his recitation. And his recitation is, of course, that of the Imam. He's the Prophet ﷺ standing as the Imam, who, if he starts getting confused now, then, it's taking things in a retrograde direction, not kind of helping progress things forwards for the collective congregational prayer. So it would obviously be an issue. So he said, do not do so thereafter. From now onwards, do not recite behind me. On the other hand, however, you have the hadith of the Prophet which says that there's no prayer for the one who doesn't recite Fatiha. And he said any prayer recited without Fatiha is فَهُوَ خِدَاج. That it's actually invalid, it's invalid. So Fatiha is important. And separately in a hadith which some contested discussion thereafter surrounding it, says that actually do not recite behind the Imam except for Surah Al-Fatiha. And lastly, we have the hadith which says, again, with some discussion regarding this authenticity, says that the qira'atul imami, the qira'ah, the recitation of the Imam is the recitation for the one praying behind him. That hadith is questioned in terms of authenticity by some scholars as well. So that gives you an overview of all the ayat and ahadith, which really gives you a sense of what's going on in the minds of the jurists. Now, how to reconcile between all of them was the question of the jurists, classically speaking. Some said that actually, on the one hand, they said you should never be reading behind the Imam full stop. That's the Hanafi position in terms of, so if the Imam's there, even in Dhuhr Asr, the quiet salahs, not the order ones, you don't recite after behind the Imam. And you're meant to listen, and the Imam, qira'ah of the Imam is the qira'ah of the ma'mum, the one who's following. On the other hand, you have the position which says, and that's aligned with the Maliki school of thought, which says that if the Imam is out, then you don't recite, but in the quiet rak'ahs, you do recite. Okay, and you recite Fatiha in the fourth rak'ahs. In Dhuhr and Asr, you'd recite even in the first two rak'ahs, and you recite the second surah after Fatiha. As for the Shafi position, then they say that you need to recite Fatiha in every rak'ah, even in the audible rak'ah. So the once the Imam finishes, you recite quietly to yourself. And so that's the position with respect to Shafi school of thought, and one of the opinions in the Hanbali school as well.
Jazakallah khair. Perfect timing. Once again, time for another break. You're watching Ask Eman. Thank you. Welcome back to the last segment of Ask Eman, live on Iman Channel in conversation with Sheikh Abid Khan. Alhamdulillah, we've received a lot of Salah questions. In fact, the next generated question is also related to Salah. Sister Jasmine is asking the question, is adhan or iqama obligatory for the fard Salah?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, sister, for your question. In terms of the adhan being or the iqama being obligatory for the fard salah, the scholars did discuss this. The generally well-received position is that it is something which is considered a fard a wajib kifai, which means it's collective duty. It's as long as some people do it and people know the time for Salah has entered, the Jama'ah is going to be held, etc., then the duty has been discharged thereby. The obligation has been fulfilled. There's another position which actually says that it is actually required on each individual who's about to pray, or each Jama'ah, even the smaller Jama'at. This is a minority position, but it is based on the hadith of the Prophet to Malik ibn Huwayrith radhiallahu anhu. This says, that وَلْيُؤَذِّنْ لَكُمْ أَحَدُكُمْ, let one of you make adhan for yourselves. So that was addressed to Prophet to Malik ibn Huwayrith when he says, we came to the Prophet فَأَقَمْنَا عِنْدَهُ, we stayed with him for a certain number of days, and we were shababatun, we were a group of young men. And then now when he saw that we were missing our families and kind of feeling homesick, he said to go off back to your families, stay with them, tell them about what you've learned, call them to God, to Allah and His oneness and His worship alone. And basically on the journey, he said, well, one of you lead the prayer, the eldest one of you, the one who knows the Quran the most, different riwayat in different contexts, and let one of you make the adhan, and the other one would, for example, therefore lead the prayer. So the wording therein, it connotes that it's obligatory because it's a fi'l amr, or an imperative, a command. However, all in all, it would appear that the position of that's kind of most relied upon most commonly is that which says that it's a collective duty. So one does not need to, as a matter of obligation, to make the adhan, let's say in one's home or the like, because the adhan will be made elsewhere, etc. However, the adhan is a blessed dhikr, and it is something which repels shaitan. It kind of is a proclamation of one's own faith and reminds oneself of the remembrance of God. In it is much goodness, and in fact, there's a hadith of the Prophet found in Sahih al-Bukhari elsewhere that he says once to a man that he said, I see that you love prayer on in the valleys or on the mountaintops with your sheep, call the adhan, etc. To the end of the hadith. So this occurs in one of the hadith, all of which indicate there's virtue and merit in making an adhan either. But the question of it being obligatory, then that would be a collective obligation on those, on a jama'ah in the masjid. But as for yourselves at your homes, then there's no actual obligation on this best.
Thank you very much. Next question. It's related to zakah, which means Ramadan is not too far away. Assalamu alaikum. I loan a nephew 25,000, which he will pay back in 2 years without any interest. Do I have to pay zakah on this money that he's using?
Okay, so assuming that your zakat due date, or your zakat anniversary, as it's sometimes referred to, is, let's say, about to arrive or has just arrived today. So let's say today is your zakat date. Now you've lent £25,000 to your nephew. That means you're still the legal owner of that £25,000, so long as you haven't written off that debt altogether, nor have you entered a situation whereby your nephew is refusing to pay it back, or is saying to you they don't think they're going to be able to pay back, or you reach that conclusion, i.e. so long as it's not become a bad debt. Right? So long as it's still a personal loan which you've given them, you remain the owner and you are still liable for the zakat. However, when do you pay the zakat for that £25,000? You have two options. Of course, I should add, everything I'm saying is subject to some discussion, difference of opinion, because the issue of debts is one which is largely discussed amongst the fuqaha, the jurists. However, the position that we're giving you is the one which is perhaps quite convincing and relied upon in many of the fiqh councils. So if you still you lent that money, you're the owner of it, and you haven't given up, hope of receiving it back. However, you can pay it promptly, that's today, if today is your zakat date, or you can wait until you receive the nisab quantum of that amount, or whenever you receive the money back, let's say in a year's time, then you'd pay the 1 year's or you'd pay the 2 years zakat in one go. So you can roll up that zakat year on year and pay it on the full lump sum as you receive it back, inshallah ta'ala. That is another option, inshallah, you could do. But either way, you'd be paying it for all those years, according to this opinion, and Allah knows best.
Thank you. Next, swiftly, let's move on from zakat to pension plan. And Sister Sahela Sheikh is asking, pension plan offered by my employer. They offer matching of funds if I contribute, but options to invest are mutual funds, which may not be totally halal. Can I invest in such pension plan?
So what I'd say to you, sister, is that firstly, the pension pot itself, what is it? Secondly, the notion of there being a contribution from your employer, and thirdly, about perhaps a pragmatic and practical solution in terms of the way forwards. So coming to the first part first, which is for everyone's benefit, a pension pot is in essence just what it's a pot of money where money is going to be put in on a monthly basis, periodically, basically, for the point when you retire, or if you retire early, then you'd have access to it. It is therefore, according to the jurists and the fiqh councils nowadays, they would say it is what they refer to as deferred ujura, deferred salary and wage. So in essence, it's like a person's earning, I don't know, however much money, let's say £50,000 per annum, or let's choose a round figure. They're earning £24,000 per annum. That means they're earning £2,000 per calendar month. So out of the £2,000 per calendar month, they're removing £100 every single month, and they're putting it in this pot, which is therefore £100 that were due and in that month, but it's being deferred as a wages for them to receive once they retire. Okay, that's the mechanism for anyone who's not that financially literate. Accordingly, so long as a person's work is obviously halal, their pension itself would be, in principle, halal. The employer, again, that the activity is halal, they're allowed to also match your contribution as well. So for them to match it is not a problem either. The only question comes in terms of what's the underlying activity of the investments in which they're to be. So if they're going to be invested in, let's say, some problematic areas within the entertainment industry, then that would become a problem. But if, for example, it's something which is very ethical and halal, and there's no issue there, then you would actually invest it, and they would invest your pension as well as your employer's contribution, and there'd be no issue therein. So perhaps a practical way forwards, rather than kind of landing your employer with some huge big headache of trying to work out what's acceptable to you and what's not acceptable to you, is to try and ask or inquire about Sharia compliant, as it's called, pension. So basically, an Islamically directed pension plan. Nowadays, most pension funds actually do have an Islamic option there. Many times they're not aware of it. You have to email into them. They will go and look at it, and they realize actually their catalog of options does include a halal pension plan as well. So ask your boss or your employer to look into that, and you can almost give them some, you can coach them in it. Here's a rough draft of an email you might wish to send to the pension fund manager, and take it from there, inshallah ta'ala. And Allah knows best. I should add, finally, that both for this answer and for the previous answer, which was about zakat, you would of course be best suited to speak to a qualified scholar and a financial advisor for your specific circumstances, but this is general information, and Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair. The last statement, you've made my job easy, so I won't repeat it, of course. Now, let's move on swiftly to our next question. And we literally have less than 2 minutes. One of my elders is going to Umrah. They have a bad habit of calling with nicknames to a person who has beard. Is making fun of beard sinful? Can we go to see them off at airport?
I think you should definitely see them off at the airport. If they're doing something wrong, then in principle, that's not a reason to stop meeting with them, because in fact, maybe this might be a good time when their hearts might soften and open up to improvement and self-reform. Yes, that can be certain instances where, for example, someone doing something wrong might mean that, you know what, keeping your distance might be better. But in principle, that's not generally how things tend to work in this day and age. And then going to Umrah, yes, absolutely. Inshallah is a good time when you might find that their hearts open and soften towards it. In terms of making fun of the beard, I am reluctant to say this, but let me just gently point out. Often when one finds people saying something like this nowadays, it's not, we are fairly quick to assume that they're making fun of the beard itself. Whereas in reality, sometimes it may be about the particular way in which it's kept. It's not groomed, in the way that people perhaps appear to behave. Maybe sometimes showing double standards and the like. So that's the one point I would point out. But beyond that, people should not be making fun of anybody, let alone of religious symbols and beards and the like. And all.
Excellent. Thank you. The last point is crucial. We shouldn't be making fun of anyone, especially we have to be careful about it, especially as Muslim. We have to be more careful. Jazakallah khair, Shaykh, for giving us your valuable time. We have learned a lot, alhamdulillah. I'm sure our viewers have benefited, and a lot of thanks have come through to our YouTube channel. Until next time, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum.